So welcome. Thanks for coming. That's a hard act to follow here. But we'll also talk about platforms. I think you really don't need an introduction, and since we're in Germany, there will be no opening jokes, so let's delve right in. We're supposed to talk about AI, and I was thinking, so what should I ask? So when will your company, when will Microsoft replace you by a bot?
First of all, it's great to be at DLD and in Munich. In fact, I was reading, I think there was a McKinsey report that came out with all the jobs and the level of automation. And they had something like the CEO's job is 30% automatable. And I was thinking, man, that's what I need. Because I don't even know, what is it today, Monday? And I can't even figure out which day of the week it is. So I definitely need that 30% time. Here's how I think about where we are. To your broader question on AI. The way at least I have defined AI in simple terms is we're trying to teach machines to learn so that they can do things that humans do, but in turn helps humans. That's how I think about it, which is augmenting what we have. Now, we're still in the mainframe era of it. There has definitely been an amazing renaissance of AI, because after all, we had the AI winter. But in the last 15 years, especially because of the lots of data, and especially labeled data, lots of compute, and smart algorithms, we've had a real renaissance in AI and machine learning. And in the last 5 years, there's one particular type of machine learning technique called deep neural nets, have really helped us, especially with perception, whether our ability to hear or see. And that's all phenomenal. But if you sort of say, well, are we anywhere close to what people refer to as artificial general intelligence? No. The ability to do a lot of interesting things with AI, absolutely. And the next phase to me really is how can we democratize this access versus worshiping the 4, 5, 6 companies that have a lot of AI to actually saying AI is everywhere in all the companies that we work with, and every interface, every human-computer interaction is AI-powered. So that's at least how I think about it.
I mean, you preempted quite a few of my questions, but let's take a step back. So how do you define AI versus, let's say, general artificial intelligence? I mean, it seems to me you have an algorithm, you show the algorithm a lot of pictures of cats, the algorithm learns and then can recognize cats. I mean, is it that? I mean, to me, that doesn't really sound like intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, here's one way to think about it, right? Which is, if you're modeling the world, or actually simulating the world, that's what I would call is the current state of machine learning and AI. But if you can simulate the brain and the judgments it can make and the transfer learning it can exhibit, which is you can go from topic to topic, domain to domain, and learn, then you will get to AGI, or artificial general intelligence. Now, you could say, well, we're on our march towards that. One of the things that I've been reading a lot about is this fascinating application of, for example, game theoretic constructs on top of what DNNs can do, to essentially teach us to make judgments and make decisions when there is partial data or sparse data. But it's still not how even a kid learns language. So I think we're in that phase, which we should celebrate. We should apply as broadly as we can. So, for example, we just bought a company last week out of Toronto. Joshua Bengio out of Montreal, is one of the leading deep neural network researchers. And this is a company that does essentially text understanding. And to be able to use something like that to make a personal agent like Cortana that much smarter. It was fascinating. Just, in December, I'd sent out a mail to someone and said, hey, I'm going to follow up with these 2 gentlemen in January. And lo and behold, in January, Cortana woke up and said, hey, you made a commitment. And I was pretty stunned. I said, wow. So the fact that we're in that early stages of at least being able to recognize in free text things like commitments, and to be able to then help me keep track of it by modeling essentially what it knows about me and my world and my work, is the stage we're in.
Now, you mentioned the AI winter. I mean, what's different now? I mean, a couple of years ago, you told us, or Microsoft told us, the cloud is a new platform. Before and after that, it was big data. Now it's AI. So what makes you so sure that this is really kind of like the mainframe? This is the, I think you said, you called it the third runtime.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of different things. So one is what I sort of said in the beginning, which is the access to lots of data, in particular labeled data, along with infinite compute, especially because of the cloud, and all sorts of new resources in the cloud, whether it's FPGA or GPU or even just CPU, or even specific silicon, coupled with algorithms, right? Those three things have really helped us to make massive advances. And that's what's different. But are we done? No. Are we, at what stage are we? So if you sort of say, well, we've definitely come a long way in AI, we're out of the AI winter, we have some new things we can be super excited about. But it's still, I mean, if you even sort of listen to the last presentation, I mean, it's not about celebrating the 6, 7 companies with that power. If we're going to, in fact, address the last presenter's last section, which is, if there's going to be new surplus and there's going to be growth all over the world, then you got to get back to saying AI is a tool that is much more broadly used. So that's where I say we've got to go from the mainframe to the mini, to the PC, to the mobile era, if you will, in order to democratize it. So that
could you be, I mean, democratizing AI, that sounds great, kind of computing at your fingertips, one of your predecessors said. So what does it mean? I mean,
it means fundamentally, in our case, the way I think about it is, I always go back to who are we as a company? Microsoft. What is our sense of purpose? What's our sense of identity? We were formed as a tools company. The first product that Microsoft created, or Bill dropped out of school to create, was the basic interpreter for the Altair. I always think about any new category, what's our morally equivalent contribution in that context? Here's a fascinating thing. So given the machine learning capabilities that we now have between our tool chain as well as our cloud, the state I was born in India, and the state I live in the United States, both are using that capability to do predictions on high school dropout rate so that the educational administrators can take the scarce resources and apply them so that there are better high school outcomes. That is an example of democratizing AI. A startup in Kenya has built essentially a grid in the cloud for solar panels that they lease. But the most interesting that they're doing, these are the same founders who created M-Pesa, they've created a new company called M-Kopa, where they're now able to take those lease payments and essentially do predictions on credit. So for someone earning $1 a day, you now have a credit rating so that you can be bankable. That is democratizing AI. Researchers in Cambridge are working with oncologists and radiologists to be able to say, let's detect the tumors early and tumor growth so that the right regimen can be applied. That is democratizing AI. So to me, and of course there's the large companies. Let's take, we're in the heartland in Germany of what are some of the greatest industrial companies. What are the auto companies doing with AI? For example, the partnerships that we have formed with BMW or Renault Nissan or Volvo to be able to help them build perception into their cars, build these agents into their cars so that they can be a first-class AI company. That is an example of democratizing AI. So that's at least how we're going to approach it.
And what does that mean for Microsoft's products? I mean, your collateral kind of says infuse intelligence into these software and services. I mean, but give me some examples of how you kind of make your products more intelligent.
Yeah, I mean, the approach we're taking is, of course, we're building AI into a lot of what we do. The example I gave, perhaps the most canonical product that we have is our agent in Cortana, which knows you, knows the world, knows your work in particular, and really helps you get more done. Because one of the things I sort of say is, in all this abundance, what is still scarce is human attention and time. And having an agent that helps you with that scarce resource, I think is something that every one of us can use. Or what we are going to do with the news feeds, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it is a Delve. How do I discover information? One of my dreams has always been is how do I visualize work as it's happening inside of Microsoft? And today I go to this news feed called Delve, and that allows me to understand actually the work that's being done. Skype Translate, it's one of the most magical things, where we even did 100 people simultaneously talking across 9 languages, being able to communicate in real time. That's a breakthrough. Or HoloLens, because if you think about what augmented reality or mixed reality is, you need to be able to see the real world, reconstruct it, recognize every object, and then superimpose holograms in it. In other words, fix to the world. That's an image processing AI problem that we're solving. The thing that we do, though, it's not just about our first-party applications that we build, but it's about taking the same APIs, the same capability, whether it's FPGAs in Azure, or it's GPUs, or CNTK, which is our toolkit, which, by the way, some researchers right here in Munich help us build, and making it available so that every developer out there in every part of the world can also use them to create their own intelligence. That, to me, is the true mark of this technology becoming much more mainstream.
Now, you mentioned kind of like there's 6 or 7 companies that have the power to be an AI company. I mean, describe to me how you see kind of the competitive landscape and how these kind of AI or these brains in this battle of the brains differ. I mean, how does your AI strategy differ from IBM and Watson and perhaps Google?
I think that someone said this to me, which is, we sometimes sit around and compare these clusters of companies based on capability. I at least think that what we should see or seek to understand more is, what is the identity of each of these companies? What do I expect from Microsoft? What do I expect from Facebook? What do I expect from Google or Amazon, versus trying to say, well, they all have the same capability? In the long run, looking back at our own hits and misses, I feel that we've gotten it right when we've not looked around to see what are these other guys doing. Even if we can learn from their capability, nothing wrong in admiring someone else's sort of capability. But then you got to apply it given your identity, sense of purpose, and what your customers expect from you. And so I look at it and say, if we go back to our genesis, which is being a tools company, to help put in the hands of every developer, every organization, every public sector organization around the world, AI tools so that they can create intelligence for their own, I think we fit that identity pretty well. That's what most people expect from us, being the Office company, Windows company, the Visual Basic to Studio company. That's who we are. And in that context, we will definitely have competition from many others. But I think that where our competitive differentiation will come is not just because of our capability, but more so because of that sense of purpose and identity.
So, but tell me, so what kind of being competitive in this battle of the brains, what's more important? Is it the access to data? Is it the recipes? Is it kind of the data scientists? Kind of what's the mix?
You know, one of the things that the history of our industry has always been shaped by what is scarce today will be tomorrow's commodity. Right. So today, of course, essentially everybody talks about this race for talent and data and label data, the feedback loops. I mean, the previous presentation was all about celebrating what is well known today. But the next phase will be when that is not going to be true. And so to me, the way I look at the race is, how do you quickly think about value creation, which commoditizes whatever position you have today, which today is data and networks, and then create that next product that can then be an adjacency to what you have just commoditized. That's how our industry is shaped. Sometimes you get it right, you're successful. If you don't, you got to wait for the next turn. But that's how the terms of competition are.
You briefly alluded to kind of this I mean, it's not quite a contrast, but AI versus IA, intelligence augmentation. And it seems to me that you bet on intelligence augmentation. You don't think humans will be replaced or should be replaced by intelligence or computing intelligence. I mean, again, that sounds very good, but I'm just wondering, so hypothetical for you, you're not data center, call center, and you could develop a software that completely automates away all the jobs in the call center, or you could develop a software that kind of augments people in call centers. I mean, how do you make that decision? I mean, in the end, you're a profit-seeking company. If Salesforce, if whatever, Google develops this automation software for call centers, you're in a competitive disadvantage. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, let me just sort of say two things. One is, I definitely fall into that camp of let us use AI to help humans in whatever endeavor they are in, and thereby drive productivity, thereby drive growth. I mean, one of the things that we sit here and sort of say, wow, the world is in a great shape because of all this technology. But in reality, there is no growth. And so in some sense, I look at it and say, we need technological breakthroughs that drive growth beyond us in the world. So therefore, I think technological innovation is required. Now, I think you bring up the real pressing issue, which is technological unemployment. And this is where I think we have to go back and say, you know, what the economists call the lump of labor fallacy, right? Which is, this was true in the Industrial Revolution, that it's not as if there's only a finite amount of work. We now have to do our very best work, both as tech industry, the rest of the industry, the public sector, the governments, in being able to help our people get skilled for the jobs of the future. That, I think, is the most pressing need. I mean, in fact, I get very inspired by studying what Germany has done after the unification and what the Swiss have done in terms of really dealing with their apprenticeship program and their internships and how they have thought about upskilling and creating employment. That's what needs to happen world over. We also then, whenever you have returns on capital that are far more than returns on labor, that means there needs to be some new equilibrium. That's the same thing that happened in the Industrial Revolution, and from there came the labor movement, from there came the social safety net that all of us enjoy. So now we've got to say, what are the moral equivalents of that? Not only are we going to upskill everyone for new jobs, and also talk about the returns on capital versus labor achieving equilibrium. And those are, I think, the pressing challenges of modern democracies. And that's what we've got to go face up to.
Now, let me push you on that. I mean, you said kind of it's important how we are perceived as Microsoft in terms of competitiveness. And you try to picture Microsoft as an ethical AI company. And the first question is, what does that mean? I mean, again, it sounds good, like democratization of AI. And what I'd be interested in internally, how do you institutionalize that? I mean, in the end, what you're saying is at some point, we need to make a decision which may not be the most kind of profitable for us.
Yeah, I mean, someone, I think, said this, whose black box do you sort of trust issue. The way I've come at it is, I'm sure 100 years from now, 50 years from now, we'll look back at this era and say there's been some new moral philosopher who has really sort of set the stage for how we should make those decisions. In lieu of that, though, the one thing that we are doing, and I wrote a piece in Slate, I forget now, 6-7 months ago, which was more practical, which is to say we are creating AI in our products. We are making a set of design decisions. Just like user interface, let's in fact have a set of guidelines for tasteful AI. The first one is that let's build AI that augments human capability. Let us create AI that helps create more trust in technology because of security and privacy preservation. Let us create transparency in this black box. Very, very hard technical problem, but let's go strive towards saying, okay, how do I open up the black box for inspection? How do we create algorithmic accountability? That's another very hard problem. I can always say, oh, I created an algorithm that learns on its own, so therefore, I can't be held accountable, but the reality is we are. So how do we stand up to that? How do we make sure that no unconscious bias that the designer has is somehow making it in because of either the way we label the data or the way we do the recipes of the algorithms into the AI we create? So we just at least listed out what I think are hard challenges that we are going to go tackle along with the AI creation. Just like quality. In the past, we've thought about security and quality in software engineering. I think one of the things that we find is for all of our progress in AI, the quality of the software stack to be able to ensure the things that we have historically ensured in software are actually pretty weak. And so we've got to go work on that. And I think before the ethics, I want us to, as a company, get very, very focused on things that we can control and do, which is make the design decisions and make the investments of not just creating AI, but AI that exhibits these characteristics.
Good segue to my last question. We just heard from Scott, kind of platform means we don't take responsibility for anything. Tech becomes important. AI will kind of lead to technology even penetrating more parts of society. So, in terms of political responsibility, kind of how far do you think you have to go as a tech company? You're pretty important. Just a concrete example. Microsoft's getting asked to build a registry for Muslims. Would you say yes or no?
No to that. We've been very clear on that topic that we're not going to participate in any such program. The broader question, tech is much more mainstream. More so than, let's say, at our inception 40 years ago to now. And so I absolutely think that we should now have the same rules that apply to any other mainstream industry to tech. We need to stand up to that regulation, to that responsibility. And one of the most fundamental things I think about, as a multinational company that is an American company, we operate in 190 plus countries, is what's the contribution we are making in each one of these countries so that there's surplus that's created, that's enjoyed by the people of those countries because of the technology. There's an economist that I've been sort of reading up on where he studied the how have countries grown and how have they related to technology and its diffusion. And when you look at that data, it's fascinating. In fact, we are now able to diffuse technology much faster than, let's say, during the period of colonization or what have you. But the challenge still remains, which is the intensity of usage of new technology is what's going to define whether sub-Saharan Africa or India or other countries are going to succeed or not. And so I think there is a real responsibility for tech companies to be, and especially if you aspire to have long-term stable businesses. I'm not doing this just out of goodness of my heart. I think it's what capitalism in fact teaches us, which is think long-term and long-term returns on capital. And then if that is the case, then you better create surplus that is enjoyed more broadly and there's economic growth broadly. And that, I think, is a fundamental responsibility of companies like ours.
Thanks, Satya. Thank you very much. That's great. Please come back.
Absolutely.